All right, welcome back. So now we're trying to figure out what helps protect species from extinction. After looking at all the things that people are doing that are contributing to the extinctions, now let's look at the other side of it. So what protects them? So first off, animals will be less likely to go extinct if they can live in a wide variety or wide range of places, and if they can fill many different niches. So if they can live in many different situations, they can consume different things as well. They're going to have more likelihood to survive. Then, two, they have high genetic diversity. So we said that having very low genetic diversity is dangerous, so high genetic diversity is good. So we have a lot of variety of characteristics, maybe some characteristics that'll help them survive in this ever-changing world. Then I listed three, decent population size. We don't want the population size to be too small that they can't find a mate, right? But we don't want their population to be too big either, because if there's too many organisms, then there's going to be tons and tons of competition for resources. So I just want to have a good sized population. Okay, so there's enough of them they can find a mate, but there's not too many of them to where they're running out of food. Okay, and then next, many populations of the same species. So remember, the populations are groups of organisms that are going to encounter each other and potentially intermate or interbreed. So there could be a population living in one area of Italy and then a different population living in another area of Italy, or populations of the same species living across the world. So the more populations, the better their likelihood of survival. Then next one, they have a small body. So if they have a small body, they can hide from predators, they can hide from humans, and they don't require as much food or sustenance to maintain themselves. After that, high reproductive potential. So everything that goes along with our selected species. So they have lots of babies, they mature really quickly. Okay, all of those things are going to help them survive. Then listed separately as generalists, so they can eat a bunch of different stuff. And then last but not least, okay, humans have no interest in them. So we don't want to eat them. We're not real concerned about them in general. Um, so I was trying to think about like what would fit a lot of these descriptions, and this is what I came up with. So this is a cockroach. I'm sure you're familiar with them. So it fits a lot of those descriptors. Okay, and in fact, their populations are doing quite well. I see them, occasionally. Not so much in the colder months, but in the warmer months, I've seen them around on the sidewalk everywhere at night. Okay, so they're doing quite well, in fact. So I'm going to have you try this. So it's just making a T-chart, essentially. We're thinking about characteristics of organisms that are likely to survive, so those are the ones we listed, versus what's not likely to survive. So really we're just going for the contrary here. So we said they can live in many spaces or many places and so many niches, and that's going to help them survive. So on the other hand, if they have a very narrow range, that means they don't live many places and they have a very specific niche, like they can only survive in a certain situation, then they're not going to be likely to survive. The second one was high genetic diversity, so we're thinking on the contrary, low genetic diversity would mean that they're not likely to survive as well. So I'm going to have you go through the list, okay, just to review what's on this side, and then how we can just reword it for things that are not likely to survive. The last part of this section, we're going to spend some more time here, is looking at this IUCN Red List. So the IUCN Red List is created by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, aka, so that just means also known as the World Conservation Union. Their job really is just to monitor the state or condition of the world's species, and the red list is what is boxed in here. So the red list contains these threatened species. Okay, so specifically the ones that hit these categories. And they have different ways of evaluating this situation. There's lots of criteria that they look at. So if we look, our big concern are the ones here, mostly because the ones here have the potential to be moved off of the list for recovery. Now, once we get too far into this purple-black zone, we're saying essentially that their population is so low, if they're regionally extinct, that means they're gone from certain areas. And if they're extinct worldwide or in the wild, that means that the only place that they exist is in the zoo, okay, or in captivity. And extinct overall means they just no longer exist on Earth. So we're trying to save them before they get to this zone. Okay, and our goal is to move them into this area of lesser concern where their populations are higher and more stable. So what do we consider when we're trying to list things on the red list? There are a bunch of things and stuff that is not listed here that we'll talk about more in class. But one, obviously the big one is population size, the degree of specialization. So is this organism a very particular organism that lives only in a special location that only has a specific niche? Their distribution overall, so where are they found, and what type of pattern are they distributed in? Are they existing only in these very fragmented habitats, or is their population more evenly spread out throughout a zone? Reproductive potential, so like how many babies could they potentially have? Okay, are they those R-selected species or the K-selected species? The geographic range and the degree of the fragmentation within that land. So if they live somewhere, let's say they live somewhere, we'll just say in the tropical rainforest. So that's where they live, but they live in a zone that's highly, highly fragmented. That's going to put them at a higher level of concern. Their trophic level is also a concern. So things that are higher in trophic levels and actually things that are just tend to be bigger in body size are more likely to go extinct. So those are things to consider. And then generally calculations for the probability of extinction. I don't see the clock time, so I'm wondering how I'm doing on the time here. Hopefully I'm recording. There are many other things and there are benefits to being put on this list. So if you're put on the red list, there'll be more funding to help protect that species. In fact, there's been arguments for scientists essentially to classify very similar species as two separate species, because if they're classified as two species instead of just one species, then they're more likely to be put on the red list, and people are more likely to get the funding to help protect those species and their populations. So it's a big deal. Okay. Then we have some review questions. I actually just going to show them to you for our, well, yes, for our group 1 class, so class that met today. I do want you to try and answer them, and we can go over them in class when we see each other again on Monday, just because we're going to have very infrequent classes over the next week. So question 1, so just you don't need to copy the question if you don't want, but you can just respond to the best of your ability. Question 2. And question 3. So this one's a little bit long, but it gives you 3 different species in 3 different situations. You're trying to figure out which one is most likely to go extinct. Right? So I also uploaded, let's see if I can find all my stuff here. This note catcher. Let me see. I want to make sure I'm recording. How terrible would it be if I did all this and I wasn't even recording? So I guess I am. Good. So this note catcher is great because it just outlines all these different things from the IB guide that you were supposed to be able to do. Now, the way it's set up, it's listing those bullet points on the guide, and it's asking just that you write notes that would help you answer this. So for the first one, it says, okay, estimates of the total number of species on Earth vary considerably. So I might write something like, okay, there are between 5 and 50 million species. Okay, a huge range. Okay, so they're based on mathematical models. Okay. We also know just from the past, so we have not identified all the species. Okay. And, that's really unlikely that we're ever going to within our lifetime. So we have not identified all the species. Okay, so they are based on mathematical models, which are influenced by classification issues and a lack of finance for scientific research, resulting in many habitats and groups being significantly under-recorded. Okay, I just add a few things from my own background knowledge. So classifying, this is things that you can add as well. So classifying organisms is, time consuming and challenging. So it's challenging actually to prove if two frogs are the same species or different species, would they mate in the wild, etc. I mean, you have to stand there, you got to watch them, you got to collect all this data. Okay, so it's time consuming and challenging. Well, I'm going to add one thing. Expensive. So if we're paying a team of people to go watch some frogs somewhere and see if they're mating and reproducing, that's going to be rather expensive. Okay, so the classification, remember, classification just means how we identify these different organisms. It could be, the kingdom, phylum, class, order, genus, species, all of that, but we're really just looking at the different species for our purposes. But there is a classification review within the notes, and you can add that information if you want to. Okay, so let's see. Then we go down and we're just trying to add as much information as we can. So the current rates of species loss are far greater now than in the recent past due to the increased human influence, human activities. The human activities that cause species extinction include habitat destruction, introduction of invasive species, pollution, overharvesting, and hunting. Okay, so we can just take some notes regarding this issue. So I would start with the estimates. So I think we said, for example, we estimated that 100 species in every million species. Is that correct? Goes extinct each year, and that's somewhere between 100 and 10,000 times greater than the background extinction. So we'll write that there. We can add some examples for the information given at the bottom, as well as some other information that we included in our notes. So it's really just to help you organize your thoughts. It's a good way to keep things organized as you're moving through the IB program. Okay, so do your best, and I will see this class on Monday. Okay, have a good retreat.